else in the world do you see terrorists throwing Molotov cocktails from a place of prayer? Stockpiles of weapons stored in a space that is meant to serve God. Riots igniting from within the walls of a holy and sacred site. The answer is chilling. The Al-Aqsa Mosque on Jerusalem's Temple Mount, right behind me. This is a site meant for worship and peace, and it has become a hotspot of violence and incitement, turning what should be sacred into a stage for conflict. Jerusalem, a city rich in history and meaning, is home to the Temple Mount. For Jews, this site has always been the holiest place on earth, as it is built on the ruins of Solomon's Temple, the ancient center of Jewish worship and the location where the Ark of the Covenant resided. For centuries, Muslims respected Al-Aqsa as an important religious site, but only in recent decades it has been politically branded by Islamic extremists as Islam's holiest site, despite Mecca and Medina being the true spiritual centers of Islam. This shift is not about fate. It's a calculated move to fuel tension and deny Jewish connection to this site. The Waqf, a Muslim religious trust under Jordanian oversight, is responsible for managing the Temple Mount and its Islamic holy sites. Israel allowed the Waqf to retain control after reunifying Jerusalem in 1967 as part of a goodwill gesture to maintain peace and ensure Muslim access to worship. But instead of being a neutral caretaker, the Waqf has often used its position to push a political agenda, allowing the site to become a breeding ground for violence. During Ramadan, in particular, the Temple Mount transforms into a flashpoint, with riots breaking out, weapons stored inside the mosque, and attacks targeting Israeli security forces and civilians. The Waqf doesn't just look the other way, it actively contributes to this chaos. They permit and sometimes encourage the spreading of false claims, such as accusing Israel of endangering Al-Aqsa, which incites violence not only in Jerusalem, but across the region. These provocations have led to bloodshed, with soldiers and civilians becoming victims of unrest. As Ramadan approaches, tensions in Israel are reaching a boiling point. Extremist Islamic groups are threatening to make this year the worst Ramadan in a decade. And as always, we'll use the Temple Mount as a flashpoint for riots and violence. As part of the ceasefire deal with Hamas, convicted terrorists are being released back into Judea and Samaria and East Jerusalem, further strengthening those who seek to destabilize this region. These threats don't just stay confined to the Temple Mount. They ripple across the entire country, affecting soldiers, civilians, and communities alike. It's a stark reminder that the actions of the Waqf and the incitement from extremists aren't just about controlling a holy site. They're part of a broader strategy to provoke unrest and undermine Israel's security. I'm meeting Mati Shoshani, this guy over there, for a stroll in the old city of Jerusalem to discuss this scenario further. We're heading towards the Huldah steps that lead up to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But before we dive deeper, don't forget to share and subscribe. What's up, Mati? You missed the best part. I'm calling our viewers to share, like, subscribe, and click this little bell button.
Please do that. It helps us a whole lot.
So yalla, let's go to the old city of Jerusalem.
Let's do this.
So Mati, can you explain where are we, what is this place, and what's its importance to Jews, Muslims, and Christians around the world?
Let me
let
me stretch before I give an answer to this difficult question. We're standing, me and you, overlooking the Western Wall and the Temple Mount. This is the location of, according to Jewish, Christian, and Muslim belief, the first temple, the second temple, and currently the Al-Aqsa and the Omar Mosque on the Temple Mount. And what we're looking at is the Herodian wall, the wall built by Herod the Great in the 1st century BCE. On top of it is a millennia-long series of churches and mosques and Jewish structures that were built on this mount. So we're looking at the holiest of holy sites for Jews, Christians to a lesser degree, and Muslims to a much lesser degree, and we'll unpack that in a second.
Yeah, okay, so you say that it's for a lesser degree to Muslims. I've been in Gaza and I've seen Al-Aqsa Mosque on pictures on the walls of people. This is a rallying call to defend these holy sites from Israeli aggression. That's what the Muslims and the extreme groups are using in order to rally their forces against Israel.
Yes, and the reason for that is because the Middle East does something incredible.
Yeah.
It mixes always between the political and the religious. And that's what Islamic jihad is. This mountain behind us is not one of the top 3 holiest sites for Islam.
True, it's Mecca and Medina.
Mecca and Medina are the highest holy sites. In fact, this area it's mentioned in one of the stories connected to the Prophet Muhammad, but it's not one of the most central stories. It's one more of the many stories of the Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah.
Why is it now been highlighted to a rallying cry, a battle cry for the Muslim people around the world?
Right.
Because it serves them politically. It's been this way since 1948 and before that, and with much more force since 1967 when Israel conquered, or I should say, redeemed East Jerusalem and the rest of the country from the occupying Jordanian army.
Mati, let's talk about the 7th of October. When Hamas launched its attack against Israel, it called it the flood of Al-Aqsa.
Yes.
When Hezbollah launched the attack against Israel, it called it, going up and defending Al-Aqsa. So it's all about Jerusalem.
No, it isn't.
What is it about?
Let me be obnoxious and answer with a question. All the terrorists of October 7th, what were they crying?
Allahu Akbar.
Yeah. No, none of them said free Palestine. None of them said enough of the Jewish occupation or control of the Gaza Strip. None of them said anything about we want religious freedom on the Temple Mount or anything like that, because all of those things exist.
Yeah.
They have religious freedom on the Temple Mount more than any other religion.
Definitely more than the Jewish people.
Much more than we do. We're incredibly limited. They had full freedom of what they were doing inside the Gaza Strip. They have a great level of autonomy within Judea and Samaria. What is it, this all? It's religious zealots, religious extremism that is pretending to be political or redemptive in its nature.
Yeah.
They don't care about what's happening here, and they never have. This never was the issue. And it's this lie that is pervasive in their society of we're fighting for something, but it doesn't exist. Israel doesn't control, limit, or prohibit anything on the Temple Mount.
Yeah, the body that is in charge of the Temple Mount is the Waqf.
Yes.
Waqf is a Jordanian body, and the workers are Palestinians from East Jerusalem that actually, decide who enters, who can pray, who can do whatever they want to do in charge of maintaining that place. So it's not even Israel that is in charge of the Temple Mount.
What is the Waqf? We'll explain this in layman's terms. In Europe, in the United States, you can give your land to the church. And when you give your land to the church, then the church owns that land in perpetuity. The same goes to the Waqf. The Waqf is land that is given over to Islam and stays in their hands. This land up here, in 67, when Israel wins the Six-Day War, we asked ourselves the question of, what do we do with the Temple Mount? And the government at the time, and I'm not saying this in their defense or benefit, was incredibly fearful of a situation in which the Arab nations would have a reason to continue fighting against Israel. So we almost immediately hand over the land to the Muslim control. So imagine this scenario. We win the war. We win it miraculously. We win it overwhelmingly. We win it in 6 days, as the war's name indicates, the Six-Day War. So the state of Israel, who just took control of the Temple Mount, the holiest of holies for the Jewish people, says we're not going to take over this place. We're going to hand it over to the Muslim religious governance. And today, still this date, in 2025, the control of the Temple Mount is in the hands of the Jordanian religious Islamic governance.
Yeah, and we're still being blamed for not letting Muslims pray in the Temple Mount.
Yeah, it seems like there's no winning with these people. I want to point out something else that I think people need to understand. This tiny bridge over there is called the Mughrabi Bridge. And that bridge is the only way you and I as Jews are allowed to go on the Temple Mount. Not only that, we can only go up on very specific times of the day.
What, only like 2 hours in the morning?
A couple hours in the morning, maybe a couple hours in the afternoon. During Ramadan, we're not allowed to go up.
Full month?
For a month. Anytime there's anything politically charged in the area, you and I are not allowed to go up. Yeah. For the Muslims and other visitors coming to here, they have multiple entries into the Temple Mount. You could literally drive a car into the Temple Mount if you were coming from that gate, but we're not allowed to. And I think that best explains the answer to the question, do Jews prevent free worship for the Muslims? And the answer is no. Jews prevent free worship for Jews.
Yeah. So if I go now to the other gates, the gates that the Muslims use, I will be stopped.
Yes.
Correct?
Not only that, if you go onto the Temple Mount now and you feel, look, I'm in the holiest of holies.
I want to pray.
I want to say, I've been waiting my whole life. I just want to say a small prayer. If you stop and start praying, you will be arrested. You'll be arrested for violating the status quo between Israel and the Waqf. And I've been up there, and the treatment you receive as a Jew, as a citizen of this country, is terrible from that.
I know, I've been there.
Terrible.
It's terrible.
It's rude, it's disrespectful. Yeah. It's anything but religious freedom.
Yeah, exactly. Guys, since this war began about 15 months ago, large amounts of forests were burnt down to the ground. We're talking about 57,000 acres of forests in the north and in the south, in the areas surrounding the Gaza Strip.
Yeah. And this didn't happen by chance. From October 7th until now, the Hamas, the Hezbollah, and the terrorists that are trying to operate within Judea and Samaria have systematically been targeting the forests and the living creatures of the people of Israel. And they're doing that to bring death and destruction to this country. And now we have an opportunity to flip this all on its head. We're about to celebrate in Israel something called Tu B'Shvat.
Yeah, Tu B'Shvat is the festival of trees. This is a celebration of rebuilding, of planting trees, and basically preparing for the future. And we want you to be part of that opportunity. Okay, so at TBN, we began this campaign of planting trees to rebuild the country of Israel after this war. If you want to be part of this campaign and help Israel rebuild its land, please go to tbn.org/rebuildisrael and plant a tree in the land of Israel.
And let's explain the logic behind what we're trying to do here. Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, they're trying to bring death and destruction to the state of Israel and to the people of Israel. And we're going to do the exact opposite. Yeah. We're going to show them that life and love are stronger of a force in this land, and we're going to rebuild and we're going to replant. And Yair and myself and our team, with our kids, are going to go plant those trees on your behalf throughout the country of Israel.
Yes, we're going to show the people of Israel that they're not alone in this war, that millions of Christians around the world are standing with them, united against evil and for our God.
So take 1 second, make a small donation to help rebuild, replant, and bring back green and life to the nation of Israel.
And keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. So guys, this is the best part of my walk. It's to hang out with Tomer in the old city of Jerusalem.
Going to eat some hummus.
Yeah, going to eat some hummus and sharing about what's happening here on the ground. So guys, don't forget to go to TBN Israel YouTube channel, like, share, subscribe. Keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Guys, this is the Jewish quarter in the old city of Jerusalem. Come visit us. It's a cool place. So Mati, every year there's a month called month of Ramadan.
Yes.
What's happening in this month in the Temple Mount?
Well, the idea is that Muslims fast and pray for a whole 30 days. And you would think that it would make them calm and peaceful. The exact opposite happens. Ramadan is a month of rioting, and specifically rioting on the Temple Mount. So much so that the footage that comes out of there, it looks like a combination between soccer hooligans on a really bad day.
Really?
Yeah, and all-out war. But you really need to see the images to understand.
Yeah.
If the police wasn't up there preventing them from, rioting, then they would be throwing rocks and worse, and firing live fire at the people praying down in the Western Wall.
Yeah.
That's what really would happen.
That's the danger, true.
Yeah, and they have done that.
When did things escalate?
It's happened several times here, and the most notable one that really shifted the history or the pattern of events in this region was 2000. Then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon goes up to the Temple Mount. He's warned by the heads of the Israeli intelligence organizations, listen, this isn't the time, everyone's hot. There was the beginning of a very, very violent series of clashes between, then we're talking the PLO and Israel. but it was enough of a trigger to start or to be an excuse for the beginning of then a violent series of clashes. And that violent series of clashes turns into what we call the 2000 Intifada. It was a violent series of attacks on innocent Israelis.
Buses exploding. I remember going to school and...
It was 4 or 5 years, if you really think about like the scope of it, of incredible violence on every level. Something that we both experienced as in our late teens. And more so, it was sort of the end of the dream of a peaceful engagement between the Jewish people in this land and the Palestinian people in this land.
Yeah.
And if you look at the polls, 2000 was sort of the watershed line of like, there's no peaceful solution. And that also starts this never-ending cycle that we're still living in, violent attacks from the Temple Mount, and the Temple Mount being a rallying cry for Muslims around the world. And we've seen that again and again and again, to the point now where you look at the Houthis, in Yemen. I mean, they wouldn't be able to point this out on a map, likely.
For sure.
Them and Muslims around the world, they say, oh, free Al-Aqsa. Free it from what?
Yeah, exactly.
Free it from what? It is a free temple for the Muslim people in this land.
Let me tell you also, like, Israel would allow Palestinian Muslim worshippers to come from the Gaza Strip to worship in Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount on the month of Ramadan. Despite being under the rule of Hamas, despite Gaza firing rockets at Israel, for more than 20 years.
But let's paint a picture here. Every Ramadan season, we allow, sometimes it's hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Hebron, from Kalkilia, from Ramallah, from the Gaza Strip to come into Israel to pray.
Yeah.
And we say in Hebrew, mele. If they were praying peacefully.
If they were only praying,
I said,
good.
Okay. But they're not. It's a very violent and angry event. I'll make this personal. My next door neighbor is a policeman in the old city. It means for them 30 days of violent riots.
Yeah.
30 days. And they're wearing riot gear. So think about this. If you're imagining what it looks like, they're throwing rocks at them, they're throwing sofas at them, they're shooting at them at times. Policemen are injured and sometimes killed on the Temple Mount every single year. And that is the extent that Israel is willing to go to maintain religious freedom for the Muslims in this land. Just imagine that somewhere in the Midwest in the US, let's call this the Church of Scientology, said we'd like to practice our religious freedoms.
Yeah.
And the government said, no problem, practice your religious freedoms. And the way that looked like would be that they start rioting, burning down entire streets, trying to kill policemen. And they said, this is our expression of freedom. And then in response to that, the government continues to allow them to do it year after year. That is Israel and the Temple Mount. Think about it that way.
No, it's crazy.
It's insanity.
And also would prevent other Americans from, praying in the areas that the Church of Scientology prays.
Arrest them if they try to pray. So that's what happens on the Temple Mount.
All of these terrorist groups and proxies are taking their orders from the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yes.
Okay? What does Iran have to do with Jerusalem? They're not even Sunni, they're Shia.
Yes, they have nothing to do with Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That's exactly the question. They have no reason to be here. All of this is a cynical use of religion against a political and against an internal issue that's Iranian. They use the Muslims of this country and many other countries, and they try to divert and corrupt their faith and use it into a tool of violence. And that's what happens here too.
Yeah.
I think we're at our lunch place.
I think we're eating here. So guys, we're gonna eat, but please, before we do that, like, share, and subscribe. And keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
That's fine.
Guys, they say that this is the best hummus in the old city of Jerusalem. Let's see.
That is the most dangerous thing you can say. It's a huge debate whether which is best and which isn't. You might think that the most heated debate in this region is about religious topics.
No, definitely not.
You'd be wrong. The most important thing that people debate in this region is exactly this. What is the best hummus? Is it the Jerusalem? Is it the Jaffa? Is it the northern hummus?
Abu Ghosh hummus.
People fight about this beyond what you can imagine. Anyway, we're at Hummus Arafat in the Old City in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
This is considered by many, and especially locals, to be one of the best, or the best, where we are.
And Mati will show us how to eat a hummus.
Okay. Hummus, you're supposed to, by the way, eat an entire bowl, not just dip. And it's not a side dish, it is a main dish. You take a bunch.
Good.
That is exceptional.
I think it's one of the best ones I've eaten, for sure. By the way, guys, this is a falafel. Israelis invented it. I'm sitting here on the steps leading up to the Huldah gates. These steps, right behind me, they are part of the southern wall of the Temple Mount. These steps are not just stones, they're a link to ancient times where Jewish pilgrims would ascend to the second temple, preparing their hearts and souls to encounter God. For Christians, this is super significant as well, as Jesus himself would have walked these very steps during his visits and teachings in the temple. Today, these gates are sealed and access is restricted because the Al-Aqsa Mosque sits atop the Temple Mount, a site often closed off to non-Muslims. It's worth noting that under Israel's governments, all holy sites, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, are open and protected for worship. This stands in stark contrast to periods of history when access was denied under Muslim rule. Israel ensures freedom of worship for all faiths, upholding a principle of respect for sacred spaces that reflect its commitment to the value of religious freedom. No matter the threats we face, whether from Al-Aqsa or those who twist God's name and love into tools of violence and terror, we stand strong. Behind us is not only the strength and courage of the IDF, but also the unwavering power and presence of God, guiding us and lighting the way forward.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.